With Earth Day as a backdrop and a propaganda pretext, President Obama will join communist Chinese dictator Xi Jinping on April 22, in signing the Paris Climate Change Accord that emerged from the United Nations summit in Paris last December. The Paris Pact has been heralded as a major breakthrough in saving the planet from the fictitious threat of anthropogenic, man-made, global warming, or AGW. The Obama-Xi partnership is credited with providing the impetus for finalizing the draconian global deal that will penalize the world's poor, impoverish the United States, and reward Wall Street carbon investors and tyrannical regimes, while having zero impact on the planet's climate. See our extensive coverage, articles, interviews, and video reports of the 2015 UN Paris Conference here. Unlike President Xi and other dictators who will be signing the UN agreement, President Obama does not enjoy their autocratic powers to enact the treaty by executive decree, even though he has become accustomed to acting as if he already does possess that authority. He knows that even with all of the establishment media support thus far, and with the additional propaganda to be gained from the Earth Day signing, there is still a major roadblock to final adoption: the U.S. Senate. According to our U.S. Constitution, which Obama has taken an oath to uphold, the Senate must ratify all treaties, and there is little likelihood that the Senate will vote in favor of the Paris monstrosity anytime soon. Moreover, once the American public becomes aware of the horrendous price tag associated with this UN plan to shackle the planet, it is even likely there will be a re-energized movement to kick the United Nations out of the United States. $12 trillion price tag, at least. How horrifically expensive would the UN Climate Pact be for American consumers and taxpayers, if the Senate were to ratify it? As the New American's Charles Scaliger recently reported, it will require the United States to spend at least an additional $484 billion per year over the next 25 years, for a total of $12.1 trillion wasted on radical environmentalist hobgoblins. $12.1 trillion, at least, piled on top of our already suicidal $19 trillion debt load. This new $12+ trillion load, courtesy of the UN, notes Scaliger, will be over and above all of the other trillions of dollars wasted annually on unconstitutional big government pork, welfare, and regulatory spending. Meanwhile, only the most naive observers expect Xi Jinping and the other leaders signing the Paris Treaty to abide by its terms, and only the most deluded believe that it would have any real effect on global climate even if they did abide by them. While the United States would be immediately hammered by the treaty's impact, enforced by the EPA, activist judges, a veritable army of militant NGOs, and the usual establishment media scaremongers, China and the rest of the world's major polluters would get a free ride, with mere promises to try to meet this or that treaty objective by 2020 or 2030. The Obama-Xi signing plan was first announced in the U.S.-China Joint Presidential Statement on Climate Change issued by the White House on March 31, 2016. Over the past 3 years, climate change has become a pillar of the U.S.-China bilateral relationship, the statement declares. Both countries have taken strong measures at home to build green, low-carbon and climate-resilient economies, helping galvanize global action to combat climate change and culminating in the Paris Agreement reached last December. With their joint announcement of ambitious climate actions in November 2014, President Barack Obama and President Xi Jinping sought to lead by example, and by the time the Paris conference opened a year later, some 186 countries had put forward their own climate actions. In September 2015, the two leaders laid out a common vision for the Paris outcome during President Xi's state visit to Washington. Today, the joint statement continues. The two presidents announce another significant step in their joint climate efforts. The United States and China will sign the Paris Agreement on April 22 and take their respective domestic steps in order to join the agreement as early as possible this year. they encourage other parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to do the same, with a view to bringing the Paris Agreement into force as early as possible. The US-China statement celebrates the two countries' pledges to use public resources to finance and encourage the transition toward low-carbon technologies as a priority. And it claims that China has been strengthening its green and low-carbon policies and regulations. The statement concludes, "The joint efforts by China and the United States on climate change will serve as an enduring legacy of the partnership between our two countries." China, hundreds of new coal plants, while we shut coal down. However, while President Obama has been conducting an unrelenting and unconstitutional war on coal, see here, and here, shutting down our major source of electrical power generation, the coal program of Xi Jinping's communist regime has been going great guns, building hundreds of new coal-fired plants. As the Times of London reported on December 2, 2015, citing an important new study, The Truth About China, published by the Toronto-based research group, Probe International, China is building 368 plants and planning a further 803. According to the study by 4 climate change research bodies, including EcoFICE and the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. Not only will China continue its rampage of coal-fired construction, but if the Obama EPA has its way, Xi's regime will probably be able to continue to receive EPA grants to finance its coal expansion, while U.S. coal mines and plants are being shuttered. You say you're not familiar with this EPA practice? Then, take a look at this congressional hearing in which Representative Morgan Griffith, Republican Virginia, questions EPA officials about EPA grants to help the Communist Chinese with their mining operations, while doing everything possible to kill the coal industry in America. The UN's Paris Climate Accord, if ratified by the US Senate, would guarantee Communist China's continued economic, political, and military ascendance, while simultaneously guaranteeing America's continuing, and rapidly accelerating,